Good day, ladies and gentlemen, I am Briareos Kerensky and this is the review of Valkyria Azure Revolution, or simply Valkyria Revolution outside Japan. Let me say right away that the Valkyria Chronicles games are very dear to me. I bought a PS3 just for the first one, and I was very critical of Azure Revolution from its first trailer to its latest demo. Constantly comparing the two, however, will be unfair to Azure Revolution because it's a drastically different game, sharing only few lore elements and almost no mechanics with its predecessors. All the flaws and merits this game has are its own. Azure Revolution is set in a fictional Europe with a markedly more techno-fantasy setting than before, where armies fight with swords despite having firearms, explosive, giant mechanical robots and spells. The story very loosely recalls Shakespeare's Hamlet and the legends that inspired that theatrical play. A war is raging between the tiny nation of Jutland and the Rusian Empire. Jutland has been secretly driven to arms by 5 individuals wanting to exact revenge upon Claudius, the Emperor of Rusien, and his 4 Grand Generals for burning down their orphanage and kidnapping their caretaker, Maria. Players take the role of one of these 5 individuals, Amleth, acting as the leader of the anti-Valkyria unit Vanargand. The other 4 are Sleiman, serving as a royal advisor, Fleet as a journalist, Violet as a spy, and Basil as the prime Jutland arms provider.
君の狙いが分かったぞ、スレイマン。このキューテートを叩いてルーシを落としたって言いたいわけだ。キューテートとはいえ首都は首都。ここを落としてユトランド国民にこの戦争は勝てるという意識を持たせたい。
Long cutscenes advance the story between missions, trying to give some personality to the large cast and failing for the most part. As with many other games, characters in Azure Revolution seem to talk for minutes without saying anything important. The first half of the game moves at a very slow pace, setting secondary plot lines that are barely explored and closed in a hurry by the end of the game. For example, Amleth carries out his revenge with very little concern for himself and other Vanargand members. This creates a fracture in the squad, for about 10 minutes, although Isaac tries a couple of times to downplay Amleth. During the final chapter, Isaac and Amleth reconcile with a rather half-baked explanation.
だから、説明してみろって言ってるんだ。まただんまりかい。バカにするのもいい加減に。
言いたいことはそれだけか。
Few of the primary characters do go through a narrative arc, but bizarrely enough, cutscenes that would have further increased the emotional stakes between characters or explore secondary characters are left out of the main narrative and must be manually accessed through a menu once a chapter is completed. During the second half, the story reaches its climax with a mix of cliched scenes and a surprisingly well-orchestrated twist that will make you wish that the whole story was this intense. Unfortunately, a single moment at the end isn't enough to make the story interesting. Cutscenes feel hollow due to excessive reuse of locations, lack of detail on secondary characters, and inexpressive main characters, both with facial expressions and body language. However, the various voice actors shine through, especially Miyuki Sawashiro, Violet's VA, and Daisuke Ono, acting as Amleth. The rest of the cast is no slouch either. Sleiman is played by Hiroshi Kamiya, for example, but due to poor writing and bad pacing, their performances are rather subdued. Despite that, a lot of cutscenes are entirely carried by how talented the voice actors are, and it's a pity that the visual department can't keep up with them.
そういう飲み方をするときは大抵何かあった時だから。
家も家だが、仕事の方も世話しなくてね。
But what really matters is the game, right? Azure Revolution tries to fuse real-time action with tactical elements reminiscent of its predecessors, but stumbles in more than one way. Characters carry one primary melee weapon, to secondary weapons chosen between a variety of firearms and grenades, and a number of spells depending on their level. The focus is clearly on melee attacks, secondary weapons have limited ammunition, and melee attacks replenish Ragnite points to cast spells, with characters able to dodge and guard during the cooldown times all offensive actions have. The Vanargand anti-Valkyria unit features 11 characters belonging to different classes, but such classes mean very little. Engineers can disarm mines and carry more items. Scouts move faster and have weaker weapons, for example. No matter the class, characters can equip all secondary weapons and use them proficiently, the real difference being HPs and magical element focus. Characters with strong fire and water focus quickly become favorites, thanks to explosive and healing spells that effectively replace grenades and support items. There are essentially 3 enemy types in Azure Revolution: infantry, mechs, and bosses. Infantry squads can be found patrolling the map, sitting behind sandbags, or appearing out of nowhere upon reaching designated spots, and all are as dumb as bricks. Soldiers won't attack until you do so or waltz right into their faces. When sneaking up from behind, your characters can stand right next to an enemy without the fear of reprisal. Not that you need to outmaneuver them, rushing an enemy position is a perfectly feasible tactic, and often the only one. Enemies like to clump together, becoming easy prey for grenades and area spells, and soon any kind of non-lethal grenade is ditched in favor of the explosive kind. Missions become pretty long with a lot of opposition, but with 4 characters in the squads, spamming whatever explosive tools at your disposal is very real, as they either outright kill opposition or shell-shock them, leading to fast melee kills. Mechs normally sit around camps and choke points, their size and multiple weapons inspiring fear on hapless foot soldiers. Except for the bright, glowing, easily accessible blue weak spot underneath. And closing to them cuts off more than half of their attacks. All mechanical enemies have multiple parts that can be broken down to reduce the intensity of their attacks or to stop them from moving, but always momentarily. After some time, everything is back online. Standard walkers can be easily stopped with a bazooka shell to their legs, which also stuns them for extra damage, and seeing one of those among infantry troops means a boring, protracted engagement due to their long health bars. At the very least, they are excellent sponges for replenishing RPs. Larger robots can have their legs, arms and tails destroyed, but it's far easier to ignore them and concentrate on their weak spot. When underneath them, their ranged attacks are useless and destroying one or more legs doesn't increase damage dealt. This leaves us with bosses, which again are divided into humans and mechs. There are only 2 human bosses in the game, one of them being the local Valkyrie, Brunhilde, or not Selvaria, whichever you like. Both bosses are encountered multiple times throughout the game, and only during their last fight they shake their patterns up a bit. Bosses have a lot of health, way too much in fact, leading to overly long battles that will tax your resources and patience. Huge portions of boss battles are spent running around the battlefield dodging powerful attacks and resurrecting allies when they routinely sit into a boss line of fire, scoring a few hits when possible. By the time the boss is down half their health, RPs are running very low, and you're left with standard melee attacks that do risible damage. Support items can restore some RPs, but unless an engineer is on the team, their supply is incredibly limited. Same happens against mechanical bosses, but with the extra step of destroying some parts before affecting the real health bar. Unfortunately, the game isn't refined enough for this kind of real-time battle. The lock-on is automatic, meaning that you might want to strike an enemy in front of you, but then characters will turn to target something else on their sides or behind. Lock-on doesn't follow the target, and constant camera adjustment is needed to follow the action. But then the camera has elevation limits, making very hard or downright impossible to clearly target some parts of the largest bosses. During one fight in particular, the camera actually stops you from seeing that the boss is healing itself because health bars always follow a weak point, and that boss weak point ends up outside camera limits. The large meter on top of the screen shows the ratio between Jutland and Rusian forces. The worst, however, is being unable to aim guns and spells at targets outside camera elevation ranges, forcing to position characters away from their intended target and possibly outside a weapon's or spell's effective range. And then there is the complete lack of checkpoints. Later missions can take up to an hour to complete, and after that there might be a boss fight, in itself a 30 minutes or more long affair. Die during the boss fight and you have to replay the hour-long mission. An hour-long mission that poses absolutely no challenge and is filled with the same enemies found in every other mission. Bosses might have various attacks, but the attention span and tension fade pretty quickly among squad mates that just don't want to dodge and repeating attack patterns, and dying to a botched dodge or because you are stuck somewhere is a pitiful experience, further exacerbated by having to repeat the mission before. The last part of the game is particularly guilty of this. First, I fought a boss for more than 1 hour. Then, the mission after was composed by 3 separate sections, totaling 1 hour, and died 30 minutes into the following boss fight, forcing me to replay the 3-part story mission. No checkpoints, no chance to save during a mission that posed no challenge whatsoever, even when the recommended level was 60 and my characters were level 52.
共に戦わせてください。次だ、敵将を撃破した。
As for the tactical part of Azure Revolution, well, charging hardened enemy positions is perfectly fine, and this should be enough. The game does provide some tools though, like different behaviors for the party, the chance to issuing attack orders without changing characters, or demoralize enemies and inflict other status effects by killing squad leaders. However, I've never seen characters behaving differently whether they're set to offensive or support, and changing characters just to throw grenades or cast a spell is actually easier than issuing an order. By the end of the game, enemies get demoralized by simply charging them, and aside from stuns, status effects don't play a huge role in the combat system.
作戦を説明する。
Maps appear as large and with a lot of possible routes, but a lot of those routes are closed, either by barricades or invisible walls, forcing players into a single path, and are repeated throughout the game, whether you're playing story or free missions. Free missions might actually be the best part of Azure Revolution because maps tend to have less barriers than usual and feature objectives other than simple enemy annihilation. Some even feature a day-night cycle with the chance of Brunhilde appearing for some extra experience and Ragnite stones, but again these missions are repeated throughout the game and you'll get bored by them pretty quickly. My opinion of Valkyria Azur Revolution changed as I was playing. It started out as harmless, just a game that didn't know whether it wanted to be an action game or a proper Valkyria Chronicles game, then to boring because of overly long cutscenes and unchallenging missions, and finally to badly designed, during the last boss fights, camera, game mechanics, and lack of checkpoints come crashing down on players. Is Valkyria Azur Revolution a bad game? Almost. Surely it's far from being good and absolutely below average, resulting in a mediocre attempt at restyling a well-established series. What really maddens me is not the attempt in itself. For example, Metal Gear Rising did just that and it turned out just fine, but how half-baked this attempt is, resulting in a game that doesn't know where to stand and lacks the love that permeated Valkyria Chronicles and Skies of Arcadia before it. You might have noticed that I have a full playthrough of the game, so you might be interested in taking an extended look in addition to this review, which represents my final thoughts on Valkyria Azur Revolution. Anyway, I hope you have enjoyed this video and you'll stick around for more. Briareos Kerensky, over and out.